Well, welcome everyone to another Sentis event. Our webinar today is on pre-starts in practice, lessons from the field. And I'm very excited to have a couple of wonderful panelists to discuss this topic with me. So I'm sure it will be an exciting and great event for us. Before we get into this today, I would like to just acknowledge the traditional custodians throughout Australia and recognise their connection to land, waters and community. We acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today and pay our respects to elders past and present. We extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who might be on the call with us today. And we do this because we value Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander history, culture and knowledge. And at Sentis, we have a commitment to divert our profits to land preservation projects. We have one in the Pillar Valley of New South Wales. We're proud to have invested more than 2.25 million in purchasing, restoring and managing this 465 hectares of land, a sanctuary dedicated to preserving our natural heritage while creating a positive impact on the environment and local communities. And for those of you that don't know Sentis and what we're about, we intend to be a great place to work. And we really invest in and focus on creating a strong, positive culture within our workplace. We support great work and we do that with our conservation efforts. And we do great work by walking alongside and partnering with the wonderful organisations that we call our clients. And this is the way that we aim to achieve our mission here, to change the lives of individuals and organisations for the better every day. Now, without further ado, I want to introduce our panel. First of all, we have Rebecca Hill from Horizon, with over 25 years in heavy industry across finance, maintenance, operation and rail. Rebecca understands that when you work where you live, safety has a face. I love that line. Her leadership philosophy centres on people and her journey with Sentis has been instrumental in shaping a strong safety culture. Now, we have had some technical issues this morning and unfortunately, Rebecca's dressed up, she's looking amazing and her camera is not working today. So we didn't want to cut you from the call, Rebecca. So we'll just treat this as a podcast. Welcome, Rebecca.
Thanks very much for having me.
Wonderful. And we also have Adrian Niebling from NRG Services with over 20 years of experience in QHSE management across construction, manufacturing and major projects and local government. Adrian specialises in building practical, ISO accredited systems that drive engagement and efficiency. Passionate about fostering a positive safety culture, he takes a consultative and innovative approach to workplace safety. Welcome, Adrian.
Thanks, Vanessa.
Wonderful. Let's get into our discussion today around pre-starts. Now, pre-starts are so important. They're the way that we set people up for success before they go and do their work. But there's a bit of a gap between intention and reality. So, and I'm interested to get your feedback, Adrian and Rebecca. Are these the goals that we have for pre-starts? We want to influence attitudes and make sure people have a positive attitude around safety, looking after each other. We want to get our crews focused and motivated. We set a clear direction so they know exactly what they're doing. We want to use pre-starts as an opportunity to gain feedback so that we can be investing in continuous improvements and want participation. Obviously, it's a safety focus and it's an interface between crews and leaders. Does that sort of fit your idea of goals for pre-starts?
Absolutely. I think it's your first touch point for the day. Your people really are how you get your work done safely. It's really not about the work, it's about the people. If you get off on the wrong foot, if the tone is not quite right for that day, it will follow you all the way through that day. So for us, that's that first opportunity to gauge where everybody's at. It's the first opportunity to start that safety conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Rebecca. So that's actually a great, we're influencing attitudes. We're making sure we're kicking things off the right way. You may be aware of our ABR model here. And if we sort of reverse engineer it, we want our result to be safe, high quality, productive work every day. And how we get there is in terms of behaviours. People need to be motivated for work, focused on their tasks, they're risk aware and they're communicating effectively. And so those behaviours that drive those positive results stem from our attitudes. And it's the pre-starts, as you said, Rebecca, that's so critical in terms of setting people up for success. They know what's going on, what's expected of them, and they're switched on to do their work well. Now, it may be surprising, it may not be surprising to you that our research shows that 51% of employees describe their team's safety meetings as a poor to average experience. So there's a real gap. Those are our goals for pre-starts, but more often than not, they're probably not really hitting the mark. So if we unpack why that is, and again, I'll get your feedback on this, but it can be things like this. Presenteeism. So that's when someone is there in body, but maybe not there in spirit. So they've turned up, but maybe they're not tuned in, they're not listening. A passive audience. I've heard people say that trying to get participation in pre-starts is like trying to get blood out of a stone. So that can be one problem. Not an engaging experience. Again, people have said, pre-starts are about as boring as white dog poo. So it doesn't have to be like that. But if our pre-starts are boring, people are tuning out. And the other issue is complacency or performance drift. One thing we know about the brain is that if we run a pre-start exactly the same way over and over, our brains switch off and we're not attending. What does that fit with some of the reasons you find pre-starts are falling short? What do you think, Adrian?
Yeah, absolutely. I think they've been around for a long time, but I think we can sort of make them more complicated than they need to be. I think that having the right location is very important. The amount of pre-starts I see getting done beside a generator that's running on a construction site, and you've lost people before you've opened your mouth. They can't take anything in. They're competing with the generator or the truck that's driving past. I think we've all done it. We've all been there. I think I broke that rule myself this year when we did some pre-start, some safety resets, and it just wasn't the right environment, so I didn't get the best result. But you sort of pick yourself up and improve on it from there. But also being prepared. I think once you start reading from a script, instead of looking at the relationship and the conversations, people will switch off as well. So looking people in the eye and having that natural conversation that comes out, I think is pretty important.
Fantastic, great points, and a really good segue into, we're going to cover actually 6 actionable strategies to enhance pre-starts, and some of those will really resonate with what you've just mentioned there, Adrian. I'm also keeping an eye on the chats today, so if you want to participate, ask questions, we'll try and leave some room at the end or weave those in as we go. So let's get into this, and the first one, like you were mentioning there, Adrian, number 1 is set up for success. So a little fact about the brain is that our conscious attention acts very much like a torch beam. So we can only focus on one thing at a time. Imagine you're in a dark room and you have a torch with you. You can only see whatever is at the end of that beam of light. Our conscious attention is a lot like that. While we can multitask and switch our focus quickly between different things, we can only be focusing on one thing at a time. And as a consequence, it means that we really need to look at managing distractions. So it can be visual and auditory distractions, like you said, running a pre-start next to a generator, for instance, is maybe not setting yourself up for success. There's internal distractions as well when people have a lot of stress, if they've got things on their mind, if they've got some family problems at home, or if there's been some workplace issues that might be distracting people's focus, then their torch beam of attention will be on something else other than the important information in the pre-start. I actually met a lovely gent from a safety conference that I was at in Perth last year, and he mentioned that the pre-starts where he worked needed some tweaking, because he said they do their pre-starts on the bus. So people literally have rolled off the plane or out of bed or whatever, and in the 20-minute journey between the town and site, that's when they're doing the pre-start. Now, if you think about that, you've got the safety leader at the front of the bus. They can really only eyeball, the first, 2 or 3 rows of people. Everyone else is behind the back of the bus seat in front of them. And so most of those people, they're on their devices. They're not even, you know, looking at the person speaking. So that is really problematic in terms of, you know, there's too many distractions for people to really be paying attention. So what are your thoughts on this? So you've already mentioned a couple of things there, Adrian. Is there anything else that you do or you instruct people to do in order to set up for success for a really effective pre-start?
Look, from my experience, I think you have to get the definition of what a pre-start is clear. There's been, you know, there's a lot of different definitions out there between people trying to cover every single risk possible on site and sort of deviating away from that short, sharp conversation that engages people and like Rebecca mentioned, just understanding the I guess the context or the attitude of people on the day and making sure that everyone's ready to go. So I think that's pretty important, is that we understand what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah. Yes, and I love that you mentioned, you know, the difference between reading off a sheet and being very scripted versus being able to look people in the eyes and actually see, make sure they're connecting, make sure they're paying attention, and you're also able to assess how people are going. You know, how are people showing up in the room that day? Rebecca,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on setting up for success?
Yeah, that's similar to Adrian and the conversations that we've had. We've had a lot of turnover in leadership, so we've got a lot of younger leaders who are developing, and I think that you're dead right. They want to cover everything all of the time, which is lovely, except for the fact that people will only remember 3 things when they leave the room. The 3 things really need to be: what's the work of the day, what's going to hurt me, and what do I need to do to stay safe. We've done a little bit of road testing with the effectiveness of that. And ultimately, if that's the 3 things that we want our people to know when they walk out of that pre-start room, if I stand on the other side of the door, in theory, I should be able to get a really firm and definitive answer from everybody if the message or the intent that we've tried to impart to the team has actually landed with them. I think we had about a 60% failure rate. We had to go back around the number of people and literally those 3 questions: what was your work of the day? What's going to hurt you? What do we need to do to stay safe? They had to go back around in the back door and come back through and have a bit of a drive-by. And I think that was quite a realization for the leaders around the number of times that you have to give that message and then check for that positive understanding before people will actually retain it and walk out of that room.
Yeah, that's a fantastic process. And you know, I think that's a really great tip to other leaders that might be listening. Is the message getting through? And how can you test that? And it could be that you want them to walk away with those 3 key focus points. Check that they've got those three focus points. And if not, maybe it needs to be done a different way, or it needs to be gone over again, because, you know, pre-starts are a critical start to your day. So we want to make sure that they are effective. Thanks for that tip, Rebecca. And just like, it was such a great segue, just like you were mentioning, we need to limit the information that we're loading people up with. A little brain fact, and this comes from some research a long time ago, where they found that the human brain can only retain 7 plus or minus 2 bits of information. And really, it doesn't really matter about the actual number. The message here is we have to be aware of overloading our people. I don't know if you remember your site inductions or think about the induction process, but that's a similar thing where when people start at a workplace and they're onboarding, we absolutely cram them full of you know, policies and procedures and information. And in the great words of Dr. Phil, how's that working for us, right? Like, it's so easy for us to forget things. People can do that in pre-starts as well, which causes us to miss a lot of information. The more we try and shove in there, the more is going to slip out of our ears, kind of thing. Adrian, I know that's something that you've found is a bit of a danger, that often people feel like they have to cover a huge shopping list of information. How do you get around?
Absolutely. Look, I think it's just part of it's modeling. I think going out, getting up early and walking beside people and sort of taking the reins for a bit and then just coaching them through the process and showing them the difference between one that's short and concise, and then setting people up to manage change during the day and not trying to say get everything in on the first half an hour and then they walk out not really knowing what's going on and think that everything's covered off, so we switch the brain off. It's an ongoing process, and it's a constant battle is how do we manage change along the way.
Mm. It's such a good point, actually, around coaching. It does make me wonder how people are learning their pre-start process. I mean, obviously, some people may do training in pre-start, running effective pre-starts. Coaching is really important, because otherwise what people will naturally do is just copy the way they've seen it done before, right? Which may not necessarily be effective. Rebecca, do you find that this is a bit of an issue as well? I mean, obviously you've got that 3 points of information or focus points that you try to leave, ensure that you've imparted. Is that something that all of your leaders running pre-starts now have taken on?
I think that sometimes we do it really well, and sometimes we slip back into sort of old habits. The Railways is, I guess, essentially quite an old and entrenched organisation. So often you've got leaders who have come off the shop floor, and that trap is ultimately, because they are a subject matter expert, is that they sort of can't resist the urge to tell people what the answer is. They'll tell them what they need to do, how they need to do it, and we kind of lose that effectiveness through there to limit the information and to make sure that we're actually having that engaged conversation. So that's certainly something that we're still working on. Sometimes we get it right, and sometimes we have to work a bit harder in that space. But I think that the higher the pressure situation is, the higher the propensity that we revert back to what our comfort zone is. So it's certainly something that we're working hard with the leaders on.
Yeah, fantastic. And you will find that running pre-starts, sometimes you really nail it, other times not so much, or there could be differences between people that are running them. So, part of coaching is actually a bit of feedback process. So perhaps it's a bit of an idea to have some of your pre-starts supervised by other people who perhaps run pre-starts, so that you can be giving each other feedback. Hey, I've started doing this, it really works, or I've noticed a pickup in engagement when I do X, Y, Z, so that you're actually continually improving that process. And
just add a point there, Vanessa, just something that I've seen is if you jump onto a project that has been running without the pre-start process, you can see the difference between one that gets off on the right foot from the beginning. And I think it's underestimated how important fixing the little things up along the way are. Like, they can quickly get away from you on a project or a site. I think those little tweaks that we do in that pre-start and improve make big differences along the way. And I think they have a really significant impact on the safety of the overall job, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah, we also want the people running pre-starts to recognise how important that role is. I recently had some training with someone who reflected that. He said, I've just realised when I run my pre-starts, I'm sitting down in a corner looking at, just reading off a sheet. And instead his commitment was actually to start, getting everyone in a circle where he can get good eye contact with everyone, standing up and making, using their names, creating some personal connections, and actually seeing this as a really important, because this is the thing, if you don't feel like it's an important role when you're running a pre-start, people are not going to engage as effectively as they otherwise could. So all of that setting up for success, limiting the information, thinking about what are the key bits of information or focus points that we want people to walk away with, having that bit of a plan with your pre-starts makes it much more effective. The next one here is ask questions. Now, another little brain fact is that your brain loves to find the answers to questions. In fact, it's almost impossible not to do that. Even if you don't respond verbally, if I was to ask you, you know, how old are you, or what's your middle name, immediately those things pop to mind. And so questions automatically activate the search engine of our brains. But we do have to just take heed that the quality of our questions determines the quality of our thinking. So some questions may not be as effective or helpful as others. And sometimes when there is an incident or something's gone wrong, the first question that that person is asked is, what were you thinking? What were you thinking? Or why did you do that? Which obviously is going to create defensiveness, and people's brains will be searching for excuses rather than maybe other questions that would be more helpful, like what's getting in the way of you know, doing this job safely, or what might we need to do differently so that we can follow the process? What's needed here? Different questions, better questions activate the brain differently. And when we do ask questions, we can be achieving all of these things. We're getting active participation. So asking people, what are your suggestions? Getting them involved. We're engaging their thinking. We're encouraging ownership taking. So what are we going to do? How can we work together to resolve this issue, for instance? And we're checking for understanding, which is so critical. I was working for an organization, working with an organization a little while ago, and they said one of their challenges is that they have a lot of culturally diverse people who may not have a really strong hold on English. And sometimes these people are following procedures really well, and other times people are not following procedures, which I thought was really interesting. And this is an opportunity to be asking questions. I asked them, do you use questions to actually determine how, you know, that level of understanding? And they said, oh no, because everyone's been through the training. We can't just assume that because everyone's been through the training, they're always going to retain that information. So in terms of our safety questions in pre-starts, they can be pretty average. I'm sure we've all been to pre-starts where it sounds like this. So everyone know what you're doing today? Are you aware of the hazards you're facing? Got everything you need? Any questions? Now, any pre-start where the crew can basically respond just by going, yep, yep, no, yep, no. That's not engagement. You know, if you're getting a lot of yeps and nups in your pre-starts, then we need to change the questions. Here we're making them a little bit better. They're a bit more specific. But what you might notice is that these are still closed questions. So people can effectively just answer in yeses and nos. What we want to get to is more open questions that invite deeper thinking. And you want to be able to test that that person, you know, it's actually your crew that's going out to do the high risk work. Okay. So just like Rebecca was saying, sometimes when we have the experience and the information, it's very easy to fall into the habit of telling people what to do rather than asking questions, because what matters is that they know what to do. And if they answer, it's much more effective, and they're going to be much higher motivated to do it and the correct process, rather than if they've been told what the correct information is. So how are you, Rebecca, I'll start with you. How do you find asking questions in pre-starts is going? Is it effective? Is it something that you're working on?
I think it's something that changes from day to day. I think that there is a conversation that is forefront for everybody at the moment, which is around psychological safety, and I'm sure that that's the topic of many other webinars. But I think that it's really critical for the leader to have that established relationship and to have that safe space. And it's not a safe space because we tell you it's a safe space. It's a safe space because we demonstrate that. I see a very different engagement model between different sort of personality types with their leaders, and you know the leadership is certainly reflected in the way that people are willing to engage. We have actually started sort of practicing some of those lines of questioning in our low risk situations, so that when you get into pre-starts and things do sort of go sideways, and sometimes they do, the ability for the leader to regulate their emotions enough to stick to that open questioning, because the rabbit hole you want to go down is that you shut the questioning down, you ask the closed question because you just want it to stop, when in actual fact, once you're uncomfortable and you've got the team in that space, we really need to actually take the time to dig in and continue to get to the bottom of it. So it is something that we're actively sort of almost training for, I guess, essentially, outside of the pre-starts, so that they've got that toolkit to be able to navigate. We also saw that generally when we share incidents and safety shares, especially from other parts of the organisation, the temptation is for people to read it out. And the really easy go-to is that they must have done something wrong. That could never happen to us. We don't do that specific task here, so that's not relevant. What we have seen since we've done the Sentis training with all of our frontline maintainers is a level of maturity where they will actually see that parallel. It might not be exactly as what you've, it's not a carbon copy of the task that you do, but what it is that translation to, well, if it can happen there, it can happen here. And that level of maturity, I think, has been what has sort of pushed us to that next level, I guess, of the safety journey, around being able to ask those questions and get a considered and relevant response.
Fantastic. Yeah, and work in progress. I think it's a great take-home tip to consider the questions that you ask in pre-starts. Think about being a bit planned with them. What are the questions that need to be asked in order to achieve that outcome that you want to have with a pre-start? What are your thoughts, Adrian, on questions? Is it something that you're integrating into pre-starts?
Yeah, again, I think you can fall back into bad habits, but it's so critical, I think, for people to feel like they're part of the overall success of the day. And I think by just having things delivered to them with no real requirement to have input in, just kind of creates the opposite environment that you want to create. And by having them ready to be able to answer any questions, I've seen some supervisors just go around the circle and ask people questions, and they know it's coming. So there's no opportunity to sit back and just be distracted. You got to be on the ball, and I think that's a great initiative. It works well, but at the same time, it can become a bit monotonous. So breaking things up too is good. So I think I saw one of the questions come up before about the challenges. It's just trying to keep it fresh and trying to keep people engaged, and having those open questions is a great way to do it. And we need constant reminding to come back to that,
Yes.
and ask people specifically without trying to embarrass them, but set them up to succeed and feel part of the success and input into the day. Yep.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a bit of an art form, asking good quality questions, but it's definitely worth investigating and building our skills in that. And I'd certainly encourage people to share with each other in a workplace what are some great questions that do get that active participation and engage the thinking in the way that you want to engage their thinking. So share those sorts of questions and start integrating them. But we do have to change as well, so that we're not asking the same thing. As soon as I can rehearse an answer, my brain has left the building, So if we're not changing it up and asking different questions, then it all becomes to situation normal. Now, there's a great comment in from Thomas. Thank you for that. He's talking about the danger of asking people, does everyone understand? You know, have you got it? Because as a part of our human psychology, we do not like to feel vulnerable. We do not like to seem incompetent, particularly in a crowd of people or in front of our crew. And so when we ask people, do you understand? You know, has everyone got it, sort of thing? People will always say, yep, even if they're thinking, oh, I'm not quite sure. You know, I can't remember this procedure, or I'm not sure what's happening after this, or whatever. We will say yes to that question because we don't want to seem like, you know, the person that's not with it in the crowd. So that is a great opportunity to ask different questions. So remind me of what you're doing today, and, you know, just like the focus points that Rebecca mentioned, you know, what are you doing today? What are the things that could bite you? What are the things that could hurt you? And how are you planning to navigate those? So you get it from them. And that way, you know, if they don't know how to answer, it might be, oh, I'm not quite sure about this. Then you've actually found a gap. And that's a great thing, because otherwise we can think that we've checked that everyone understands something. We feel confident that they're fine, and off they go, and they haven't gotten support that they needed. Now, using storytelling is our fourth tip here. So when we use storytelling, we're activating the emotional brain. Now, often we rely on facts and figures and things like this sort of data. And data certainly is interesting and absolutely has a place. But the impact of a personal story, or when we engage the emotional brain, that's when we can really feel connected to an issue. So, and storytelling doesn't mean it has to be a long-winded, you know, it's not going to blow out your pre-starts to, you know, 40 minutes or something like that. Sharing stories can be very, very succinct, and they can be about lots of things. So it could be current affairs or news events that have a bit of a safety link that might be relevant to the work. And just as Rebecca said, it doesn't have to be specifically around the same context or the same tasks. It could be that there's been some kind of a current incident where, you know, fatigue was related, or people sort of just making an error because of stress, for instance. That could be something that you use as a little safety share, just so that, you know, we're reminding each other of our humanness and things that could get in the way of our safety. You could be taking little tips from other industries, what they're doing well, or something, you know, something they've learned from. It could be a personal example, something that's had an impact on you. We could also be using storytelling to share little safety wins from within your own company, or others like yours in your industry, sharing an interesting statistic or recent research finding. Now, sometimes people struggle to come up with, you know, and particularly because we want to keep it fresh, we want to keep changing our little stories that we tell. It can be sort of challenging to do that. So we have actually created a positive safety conversation starter booklet. And in fact, great news is that one of you on the call today will actually win one of those. We're going to give one of those out for free. But this is a little resource. It's in the chat now. It's a little resource that has over 75 different conversation starters, and we've put those in the groups of physical experience, social experience, and psychological experience of work. Each of those areas has 5 different topics underneath it. And this is really just helps safety leaders to come up with different little consider this or did you know statements to spark a little bit of an interesting conversation. So there's different little facts, neuroscience in there, all that sort of thing. So this is a resource that you can come up with. You can come up with these sorts of things yourself, or you could use something like this to make it easier for you, just as a way to spark some of that conversation. How do you find using storytelling in your pre-starts? Is that something that people have sort of embraced? Rebecca, I'll go to you first.
It's taken a little while. I think that the vulnerability piece is very new for people to come to terms with. Some people sort of deal with that a lot more comfortably than others. But I think that the storytelling piece, and when it actually gets to to being something that is very personal and very relevant and hits very close to home. Unfortunately, we had a tragic fatality within the business last year in a light vehicle collided with a truck, and to see the impact that that had on the teams as we shared that really sad news was quite, I think, very powerful in terms of the fact that it gave us that platform to have those meaningful conversations. And then it doesn't take a lot for somebody to start that sort of vulnerability, and you'll see the rest of the team will start to open up about that. And I think that every time we have that conversation and demonstrate that everybody has an element of humanity in them that isn't so different. We all think that we're so very different to each other, but we're really not at the sort of grassroots piece. And when they see that happen, I think it brings the team closer together. And what your PB5 is, what is your why becomes really, really personal. When the guys start to talk about their children and their families, especially, we see that come through really strongly. So it's that common ground is absolute gold when it comes to being able to really, get the message to hit home for all the right reasons.
Yeah, thank you, Rebecca. It's interesting. I worked with an organisation a number of years ago where there had been a fatality, and it's interesting because a lot of the reaction from an organisation is to not talk about these things, to sort of, obviously we don't want to cause people distress, etc. But we can sort of inadvertently be sweeping things under the rug. The CEO at this organisation was actually very forthright that, no, we need to talk about this because this was one of our people and they matter to us and their family matters to us, and we need to keep cognizant of the impact that this had. And so talking about it and creating a safe space for people to talk about it and discuss it and learn from it, and not forget the impact, was actually really powerful in that organisation. So yeah, that's interesting. Adrian, how do you find incorporating storytelling into pre-starts?
Look, I'm a storyteller. They're absolutely powerful. I had a conversation with a worker yesterday on one of the sites that I visited, and he sort of brought up a story that I'd mentioned in the safety reset that we did through January. So making it personal, it shows you that things do happen. I think sometimes we can get complacent, and even with alerts that come through the division, we can sort of, they're a bit too far removed from us. But if it's somebody that they know or something that's happened to a worker, they're so powerful. And I think even, the safety advocates, that program as well, getting people in and talking about that, I think it really has a big impact. And I think even the safety notices that we send out to say there's been something that's happened in the organisation makes it a lot more real. And has a big impact on people. And I think one that comes to mind is, if I can just share an example, talking about driving was something that I'd mentioned in a recent meeting, and I think I shared something that happened to me as an 18 or a 19-year-old driving, working around the clock, and having a fatigue moment that could have been where my life ended. And just by bringing that up, I think I had 4 or 5 people share something very similar. So it's almost like the open questions. You're drawing out other people's experiences, and it really hearing how it's impacted them as well, and what they've done to kind of go, I'm not doing that behavior again. Like, I've pulled myself up and sharing them with other people. So yeah, massive impact.
Fantastic. Yeah, so, for those of you on the call, I implore you to not shy away from using storytelling. one of our people on the line said, I find storytelling makes attendees engaging as it shows vulnerability and connection. So yeah, it establishes really good quality relationships between you and the crews as well. And so number 5 is make it dippy and fun, because the thing is that pre-starts don't have to be boring. They don't have to be all about danger. We can actually make them fun and engaging as well. And so this is the way the brain works. Every moment of the day, you have millions of bits of information flooding into your brain from all your 5 different senses, everything you can see, feel, hear, taste, touch, etc. All of this information comes into the brain, but it doesn't all get your conscious attention. There's no way you could consciously attend to all of that information flooding in from your senses. So your brain filters out most of it and only retains the necessary information. How does your brain know what the necessary information is? It uses a filter that we call the dippy filter. And only things that make it through that dippy filter go to the conscious awareness. The rest goes to the subconscious. So dippy is a little acronym that stands for dangerous, important, pleasurable, and interesting. So in order to get my focus and my conscious attention, the information in pre-starts, it needs to be something I feel that is going to, help me from hurting myself or losing my life. So it has to be, meet that dangerous criteria. It has to be important, so relevant to me and the things that I most cherish. So that means, for instance, my family, myself, generally we are the most important person to ourselves. It has to be pleasurable. So it could be in a pre-start, that could be use of humor. It could be something sort of interesting that's a bit unexpected. So the message here is that our brain filters out anything that is not dippy, dangerous, important, pleasurable, or interesting. So in your pre-starts, have a think about how can we, I think that we hit up that danger element quite a lot. We talk about the risks, we talk about the injuries that we could suffer if XYZ happens. So I think we can sort of generally tick that one off, but maybe we can sort of think about how can we make these messages resonate with that important, pleasurable, and interesting lens or part of the dippy filter. And you can be really creative with this. I'm actually going to hand over to Adrian because I know that you had a couple of sessions of our Running Effective Pre-Starts at your workplace, and you've come up with just a brilliant little game you play. Over to you.
Yeah, look, when 6 months ago we had put all the supervisors through the Sentis pre-start training. So I suppose listening to the feedback that came out about what some of the challenges they had around running pre-starts, I took a lot of notes, and I sort of, while I was driving home, just pondering how do we try and fill that gap and be able to keep it dippy. And so I suppose I saw one of my grandsons had these vinyl blocks, and so I sort of took that idea. I didn't steal his block, but I went and bought my own, and then just drew some images on the side. So, and the idea is that we have it in the pre-starts, and they don't know what's going to be rolled, so they throw something up. They got to think on the spot, which is what they do all day, every day. There's challenges that get thrown at them, so it sort of reflects what they deal with day in, day out. But the first one there, I'm just looking at the picture, is recognition. So it's something that, we might think someone's done a good job, but how often do we actually tell them that, genuinely tell them that, hey, I really appreciated what you did yesterday, or how you did that job well, and it looks really good, but we generally just walk past it. So it really makes it a bit more upfront. I sort of have a bit of a poster that goes along with it. So, so I suppose we're still in early stages, but looking at the gorillas, so some of the pictures look more like a dog, but I'm calling it a gorilla. Yeah, it's those hidden hazards. So if they roll that, everyone gets a chance of, something that perhaps isn't as seen. It might be a psychosocial mental health issue, or or overhead power line? What is it that we've kind of walked under or past, or bring it to the surface and say, you know, are we happy with how we're managing that particular risk? Changing it up is another one. So just going to a different location, we can get in the habit of just having it outside the crib hut or inside the crib hut. Get a special guest in, or somebody from the team to present. So yeah, look, I think happy to share that. People can, you know, I'm happy to kind of take it on the chin, as it's a bit of a childish thing in the name of trying to make it a little bit more dippy and entertaining. But yeah, people probably got some other ideas to improve it. Love to hear it.
Yeah, look, I just think this is brilliant because it does bring the element of surprise into your pre-starts. It gives people a role. And when it's going to be something different each time, you can bet that, I mean, you know, regardless of how people respond to this game, they're going to be paying attention. They're going to be engaged. And so I love that. And also, what a great embedding strategy as well, because you're actually embedding some of these Sentis concepts so that you get some really powerful bang for your buck after training. So I think it's just brilliant. It's a great idea. You should copyright that, Adrian.
It's
And
colourful and it's soft. They can't hurt each other with it. So
if it gets thrown at you, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And there's been some great little things that you've done as well, Rebecca, to keep that message going. It's a little aside from pre-starts, but I love this. To tell us a little bit about some of these initiatives.
So the little hats that you can see, I did have maintainers who tried to make it fit their heads until they realised that it was for their children, not for them. So the little hats were for the kids. So we've got a lot of people who have got young children. We've also got people who have got sort of grandchildren as well. And the PB5 becomes, if it's just something that you write on your card and put in your pocket, it can be easily forgotten. I think the more we talk about it and the more there's a face to that, the more relevant and the more powerful that message is. So the hats were for the kids, the socks are for the parents. The concept there was that that's the first thing you see and the last thing that you see every day. And that's really why we come to work, and that's why we do what we do, to stay safe. We have an amazing Lacey within Horizon, and she comes up with some of these wild ideas and had the patients, God love her, cotton socks, to sit with all of those candy canes over Christmas and put a little safety message on. And much like the dice, yeah, some people probably look at it and go, a little bit of a gimmick, but it's something different. It gets the language out there and it starts that conversation. When we gave the kids hats out, there was unfortunately, and again around that, the road fatality that we'd had, the number of people who said the way that they drive and the choices that they make on the road, now that they look in their rearview mirror and see a little tiny face sitting in the car seat in the back seat, makes all the difference. And I think that's the kind of emotional connection that we have to elicit for this to be real and for it to be important, and important enough that people will make a different decision about what they would have done yesterday versus what they'll do today. So
Right.
I have no doubt that Lacey's going to have a whole heap, but she comes up with some brilliant ideas, which we're happy to share. But yeah, she's amazing.
It's wonderful. And, you know, these questions can be brought into the pre-start, you know, so how are we going to be looking after at each of our PB5s today in the way that we work? You know, you can bring those in and keep that reminder, you know, work is not just about, of course, we need to follow processes and do things, you know, correctly, but what are we doing it for? So we can all go home to our PB5s. And the way that I work today impacts my colleagues' PB5 as well. So I love those messages, and I think that's a wonderful initiative. So number 6 here is solicit feedback and act on it. You know, when we follow through or we give feedback, when we ask people for their thoughts, their suggestions, and we hear them and we show that we're listening, and then we feed back what's happening, then we build trust. We build trust and we build participation. I remember working in New Zealand with a client, and they worked with a lot of trucks. I think they were sort of doing a lot of logistics with trucks, and they often had maintenance issues, and they were very annoyed because they said, we keep lodging all these maintenance requests and nothing ever happens and that sort of thing. And they said, we understand that not every maintenance issue is going to be able to be attended to right now. Some are lower priority issues, or you just want to hear back that it's been heard. And we want to know where it is in the process. So when is it likely to get actioned? So it's that feedback that is so critical for building trust. Is that something that you've found you're getting started, Adrian, in pre-starts, using it as an opportunity to hear from your people and build that trust by showing that you care and you're trying to take action on the things that they suggest?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give an example with the safety resets that we started through January. We had so pretty much it's a pre-start for the year, right? So I had one of the workers bring up an issue about glasses. I was talking about eye injuries, how we were going to looking at some of the trends and how we're going to prevent them. And there were a few comments from some of the other people in the team, but this guy had sort of brought up, it was probably a crowd of about 50 people, but he felt it and it was important enough for him to bring up in front of everybody, which is one thing. Like, so after the session, I'd kind of caught up with him, and the issue of fogging up glasses, it was an issue because he'd bought himself prescription eyewear that by himself he couldn't afford to put all the anti-fog and the tints and things on it, but other guys had got the standard stock issue safety glasses. They weren't experiencing the problem. So what it allowed me to do, just that feedback, have a conversation, find out that there was a legitimate issue there. And then we trialed some of these new helmets with the retractable eyewear that sort of go up into the built into the helmet. A couple of other things came out. So yeah, it's so important to follow up, give that feedback. I think it just opens up so many other opportunities. And like, I regularly contact this guy now, and I think we've been able to work through some of the other more psychosocial issues he was having. So yeah, really positive.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. And this is how we get to a culture of citizenship, right? Remember that we can't mandate people to make suggestions and participate in that way. But when we actually ask questions, we follow through, we tell people what's happening with things they've suggested, we build that trust. And then people want to actually be a part of the solution. They feel heard, they want to be involved, and we get that discretionary effort. And that's what citizenship is all about. Rebecca, any thoughts from you in how you solicit feedback and act on it?
Yeah, we've worked on the fact that from pre-starts in the morning where we have that conversation, we often make a safety commitment as a leader. And that safety commitment might be around something that we're going to do, might be around an interaction that we're going to have, whatever that looks like. And I think when you say you're going to do something, you absolutely need to follow through on that. By doing that, you close out that loop for the next day. Often you get back on the first day of your swing, and everybody sort of stands there and they say, right, what do we do well on our last shift? And there's just crickets, and it's really uncomfortable. And everybody kind of goes, can we just please move past this and make the silence stop? But if you've had that conversation and you've drawn that link from what was the work of the day, what was going to get me hurt, how are we going to keep ourselves safe today, to the conversation that you have in field with that person. And again, if we say that we're going to fix something, if we say that we're going to follow through on it, it makes it very, very easy. Then the next morning it's around, hey, yesterday when we saw that job, we had a quick chat about X, Y, and Z. Can you run us through what you did there? And it's a cycle of communication that really doesn't stop. We've recently, I think the point that you touched on there around that People really just want some feedback. Had a HSR who'd come in and he said, look, we're really frustrated because there's nothing happening. We went and had a look at it, and there was a lot that was happening in the background, but we missed that feedback piece. What was really, I guess, positive out of it was that once we actually gave them the feedback, 99% of people went, yep, happy with that. That's no drama at all. And would come back and actually say, thank you for letting us know what was going on, because that's all we needed to know. We just needed to know that it had been acknowledged, that it was being actioned, and that really that they'd been seen and that they had been heard.
Yeah. Fantastic. Wonderful. So look, there's been some fantastic tips through this session. If you have any questions, for those of you on the line, for Adrian or Rebecca, I encourage you to put that in the chat now, so we can spend our last couple of minutes addressing those questions. Before we get to that, if you would like to actually hone your pre-start game, then I am running a running effective pre-starts and toolbox talks session on the 25th of March in just a couple of weeks. And everyone that registers for that will get one of our positive safety conversation starters, that booklet of 75 different conversation starters. So, and those have been going really, really well. Very pleased. We now can offer around 3 CPD points as well on that training. So have a look in the chat if you'd like a link for that. Also, I run the Positive Safety Community, which is our online space where we all get together. We do things like meetups. We have a meetup next week, next Wednesday, on this topic of pre-starts. Our meetups are, it's a free, like a webinar, but it's a small group, and we call that our community of practice. So that's where we can really deep dive into the how and, you know, sharing examples and challenges and solution together. So please do join our community if you're not a member already. It's in the chat, or that web address is there on screen. It's we have lots and lots of free information, tools, training, etc. on there. And we have oodles of training now on our website. So you can go to our website and you'll find masterclasses, webinars, all of the webinars we've done in the past, and lots of other programs and resources. So please do jump on there. So without further ado, we've got, what, a couple of minutes left. Do we have any questions from the group?
Yes, we do.
Fantastic.
Have a couple in the Q&A box.
Or have not opened the Q&A box. Could you read those out?
Yeah. 100%. All right. So someone has asked, how would you change the mindset of people attending the pre-starts that have comments like, oh, here we go again. We know that. We know what we're doing. How can you change that type of negativity?
That's such a great question. And people do, don't they? They come thinking, oh, every morning. In fact, there's a bit of an attitude that this is getting in the way of just getting out and doing the real work, right? So how do you respond to that, Adrian?
Look, I think the way I do it is just making it short and sharp. You have to be able to see that there's value in it, whatever that looks like. I think knowing the team, and I think being consistent and finding ways to mix it up, the unexpected, whether it's an article that you find in the local paper or online, or something that's there that's a relevant topic, whatever it is, just keep bringing it, and the more you can involve the rest of the crew in it, I think, yeah.
Yep, wonderful. So make sure it's engaging. Are we hitting the mark with our pre-starts? You know, that sort of bit of self-reflection. What about you, Rebecca? Is this a challenge you've had to deal with?
Absolutely. I'm probably not quite as diplomatic in Adrian in the way that I would have approached, well, that we did approach it, because it gets to a point where it's actually quite destructive to the rest of the team, especially if you've got those 2%ers who just aren't, they're just stubborn and they're staying there, and you can't quite shift their mindset. So we did have an example of this in a gentleman who joined the team, and previous to that, he had run his own business, a small fabrication shop, and I would suggest potentially not on the same scale. Almost exactly those words, in fact, which was, here we go again. I've actually seen real work sites where we do real work, and I'm not going to stand up, and I really don't care. My advice would be call it, absolutely call it out, and don't allow that 2% to disrupt the rest of the pre-start. We've worked on some strategies around actually being able to help the leaders, give them a few tools in their toolkits around being able to call it, shut it down respectfully and constructively, but then to come back to it, because it sends a message to the rest of the crew that this is critical and we take it seriously. We're not going to allow that kind of behavior to steal that opportunity, which is really the only opportunity we get in that day to set the day up. So we're not going to allow that to be derailed. We want that to be a, you know, as effective as it possibly can be. And then to actually go and have that conversation with that person around, what did you hope to achieve by doing that? Like, you know, if that's a safety critical conversation, is it that, like, help me understand that? Is it that you don't think it's important? Is it that you're not going to change the way or the way that you're going to work, or the thought process that you've got around that? Because here's the horizon values. This is how we are going to work. I take your safety really seriously, and I kind of need you, I want you to take it seriously as well. Ultimately, we couldn't get that person to a point where they understood or were willing to give safety the credit that it deserved. And they've made a decision to move on, and that's absolutely okay. And I wish them all the very best. But if you want to be here, we want to have you here, but this is how we work.
Exactly. We teach people how to treat us, and if we don't take action when there is behaviour that's not conducive to the values that you want to see at your organisation, we need to do something about that. And taking pre-start seriously is important. Well, look, we're at time. Adrian and Rebecca, thank you so much for your valuable insights. It's been a wonderful conversation. If you have other questions, we can take it back to the community and answer them there. Thank you so much for your participation, and we'll call out, we'll be in touch with the person that's won the Conversation Starters booklet very shortly. Thanks everyone, and have a fantastic rest of your day.